Hi, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and it's time to break down this preview versus the Dallas Cowboys, this upcoming game Sunday. Of course, I will be live streaming during the game, breaking down everything that's going on, live analysis, laughing, crying, whatever's going on. Man, I'll be doing it all during that. But today, we're breaking down how we can beat the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, with all of my preview videos, I've watched a little bit of film before I got into them. I'm not just making this stuff up out of nowhere. I'm bringing some advanced statistics as well. But I break this down with 5 important matchups, 3 big X factors, and 1 score prediction. And I am not lying with the score prediction. I'm not biased. I'm not predicting the Commanders to go 17-0. Well, at this point, we're 1-2, so 15-2. I'm very down to earth, realistic. I'm using statistics and film to back up my opinions. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, make sure you pull up every Sunday for the live stream like I just previously mentioned, where I'm breaking down everything that's going during the game live. And then of course make sure you pull up after the game for the post-game live stream that will either be an hour after the game or the next day, as in Monday evening. More than likely Monday evening, but stay tuned for the update. And without further ado, let's get it. Alright, so first of all, I think it's really interesting to note that the Cowboys have won 7 straight games against the NFC East after that victory that they just had against the Giants on Monday night. That's including 3 Giant wins, 2 Washington football team wins, and 2 Eagles wins. Even though last year they kind of caught us lacking because we were super hurt. So this is our chance to run it back and see what we can do with it. So let's go ahead and get into the matchups. The first matchup is Terry McLaurin versus Trevon Diggs. This is the rematch, man. Trevon Diggs is severely overhyped, man. I'm sorry to say it. Now, I'm a big fan of the Marcus Peters playstyle where you win big or lose big. But like Trevon Diggs, it just always seems like somebody happens to be falling when he gets his interceptions. It's not even like he's necessarily reading the route. He does it sometimes. I'm not hating. But like this Trevon Diggs can shut down Terry McLaurin narrative is completely out of control at this point. And I'm big on a lot of the Cowboys players. We're going to talk about Micah Parsons and a few other guys later. Tony Pollard, I'm very high on him. But this Trevon Diggs craziness is out of control. And I want to make sure Scott Turner and Carson Wentz deliberately attack Trevon Diggs so we can bring him back down to earth a little bit, in my opinion. But even ignoring Trevon Diggs, the Commanders have not done a great job of getting Terry McLaurin the ball. Terry McLaurin's first catch in every game so far this season, week 1, first play of the second quarter. Didn't get his first catch until the first play of the second quarter. Week 2, 1 minute and 15 seconds into the third quarter. Week 3, 8 minutes into the third quarter. It's literally getting worse and worse each game. You can't tell me that these corners are locking up Terry McLaurin like that. A lot of it is the offensive line not giving Carson Wentz enough time to look, scan the field, and get the ball out. A lot of it is Scott Turner not calling the right plays and not scheming up the guys and putting them in the best positions to win. A lot of it is also Carson Wentz just not playing well. But at the end of the day, man, Terry McLaurin not getting the ball until the second quarter of the first game, until the third quarter of the second game, and until the third quarter in the third game. For the first time in each of those games, that's when he got the ball, is unacceptable. And we're not going to be able to beat Dallas if we continue to play like that. Trevon Diggs, one of those guys, is going to win big and lose big. You can burn him for an 80-yard touchdown. He'll also get a pick 6 on you if you slip and fall. And I just want Terry McLaurin to go out there and do what he did against them previously when Trevon Diggs was talking crazy and Terry McLaurin was like, bet, and then showed him, beat him deep for a touchdown easily. We need to recreate that. And so I think if we have any real chance of winning this game, Terry McLaurin has to beat Trevon Diggs, and Carson Wentz, most importantly, has to get him the ball. Then matchup number 2, the other Washington receivers versus this not great Cowboys secondary. I mean, this secondary does not scare me at all, and I like my chances with Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel versus their corner number 2 and 3, and their safeties. I like those odds. Now, There's a lot of matchups, like their defensive line versus our offensive line and their running backs versus our linebackers that have me worried. But our receivers versus their secondary, I feel like we win that matchup. And so can we please abuse that? And you have national analysts out here hyping up our receiving core. They're saying a lot of things are not going right for the Commanders. But one thing that they really truly have that you may even be able to consider elite is their receiving group. And this is coming from people that are very low on our offensive line, low on Carson Wentz, low on pretty much every aspect of this team. But they all admit that this receiving group can be elite. But what does it matter if Carson Wentz and Scott Turner can't find a way to get them the ball? This offensive line has to protect Carson Wentz and allow him to. But at the end of the day, our receivers versus their secondary, I like that matchup. But there's a lot of things that go into that. Matchup number 3, man, our other weapons versus the Cowboys linebackers. It's mostly on Scott Turner, but we got to get Gibson, McKissick, and our tight ends out in space versus these linebackers and eat. And hopefully Cole Turner's making his NFL debut. And that's pretty cool because he may make his NFL debut week 4. And then week 5, we may get Chase Young, Tyler Larson, and Brian Robinson. And Cameron Curl just made his debut just a few days ago. So we're slowly starting to roll out our full roster, even though we already lost Chase Roulier, hopefully short term rather than long term. But either way, back to the main point, man, we gotta get these weapons versus these linebackers. The Cowboys linebackers aren't bad, but they shouldn't be able to cover Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick out in space. They shouldn't be able to cover Logan Thomas one-on-one. That just shouldn't be possible. And with them focusing so heavily on stopping our supposedly elite wide receiver group, that should allow easy mismatches for Gibson, McKissick, and these tight ends versus these linebackers and whoever else safeties they try to bring up to cover these guys. Maybe even edge rushers occasionally, maybe even Micah Parsons. We should be able to create mismatches all over the place with Leighton Vander Esch and company trying to cover Antonio Gibson and friends. It's up to Scott Turner to scheme them open though. I mean, they can't really do nothing if Scott Turner doesn't give them the green light. Of course, the offensive line has to give Carson Wentz enough time for those guys to develop their routes, because a lot of the time between the running backs and the tight ends, they'll start blocking and then they'll leak out a little bit later. Will our offensive line even give us enough time for those routes to fully develop for Carson Wentz to even get them the ball? I don't know, but either way, do what you got to do to create those mismatches, because those honestly may be our best mismatches. And like 3rd and 5 or less, get the ball to Antonio Gibson out in space and let him make people miss. Same with Curtis Samuel, along with those guys out of the backfield. We need to screen them up. We need to do all of that, man. I feel like we did not do enough screens against the Eagles that were killing us. Matchup number 4, Jack Del Rio versus Cooper Rush and Kellen Moore. We need to bring Cooper Rush back to earth, man. Make the Cowboys fans miss Dak a little bit. Cooper Rush has played well, like objectively. If you go and actually look at the tape, it's not like the Cowboys are carrying him. He's actually playing well, and I would not be surprised after this season if another team signs him over and gives him at least an opportunity to compete for a starting QB role somewhere else. I would be very surprised because, again, he's actually playing well. This is not like a facade. Of course, the Cowboys aren't asking him to do as much as they would ask Dak to do, but he's still handling it and doing it well. But it would be nice if we can go out there and be the defense that finally makes him look like, oh yeah, this is why he's a backup to Dak Prescott. On top of all of that, Zeke is still not the same Zeke as years ago, obviously. But Kellen Moore is doing a better and better job of utilizing Tony Pollard and getting him out in mismatches, just like I want us to do with Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick, our tight ends, and Curtis Samuel. The Cowboys and Kellen Moore, their offensive coordinator, are already doing that with Tony Pollard. I mean, this year is definitely looking like Kellen Moore's finally figured something out with getting Tony Pollard consistently involved in the offense and not like a sporadic thing where it happens every now and then in games. But we definitely need to limit Tony Pollard, limit Zeke, which I don't think is too difficult to do, but we need to limit that running game and force Cooper Rush to really beat us from the pocket with his arm and while throwing the receivers. We got to take away that run game and make him basically Tom Brady us to win this game. I think that's possible. It's easier said than done, but I think it's possible. Also, the Cowboys receivers are good, but they're clearly not A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, and clearly Cooper Rush is not Jalen Hurts. And I felt like our defense did a pretty decent job at suppressing the Eagles. I mean, holding them to 24 points is actually pretty impressive for how good that offense is. If you remove quarterback from every team in the NFL, the Eagles arguably have the best roster in the NFL. And then you add Jalen Hurts to that, and the offense is literally perfect for him. This is arguably the best team we're going to play all season, honestly. And it looked like the defense finally tried to figure something out. But at the end of the day, holding the Eagles to 24 points is already a tough task. But my point is, the defense is improving. It just doesn't necessarily look like it when you look at the fact that they got scored on with 24 points by the Eagles. But if they played how they played against the Eagles against the Lions, I don't think the Lions reached 20 points. I don't think the Jaguars even scored 14. So our defense is improving. They're getting better. And again, going from the Eagles to the Cowboys, this should be an easier task. Not easy. So I guess the best way to say it is less difficult. Again, it's not easy, but the Cowboys don't have A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts, and that crazy rushing attack and the best O-line in football. So come on, Jack Del Rio. It's you versus Cooper Rush and Kellen Moore. Scheme it up, produce, and go out there and make plays. Then the fifth and final matchup, Scott Turner versus Dan Quinn, man. Again, quick passing opportunities and run the ball well to neutralize a deadly pass rush attack, man. I've been saying this. We need to get the ball out of our hands quicker. We need to run shorter routes, shorter developing routes, not these elongated where they got to change direction 3 times. Our offensive line isn't allowing those routes to develop like that and giving Carson Wentz enough time to hit those routes. So we need to run shorter routes. We need to run some crosses, some drags, some slants, some more screens, and we definitely need to run the ball more effectively. Now, granted, at the soonest we'll get Brian Robinson back is next week, Thursday night against the Bears, week 5 of the NFL regular season. But it would be nice if we can get Antonio Gibson and JD because honestly, even though statistics doesn't look like it, Antonio Gibson ran the ball fairly well against the Eagles. I was actually pretty happy with what I saw from a few of his reps and carries. But at the end of the day, we still need to be better. Right now, we have one of the worst rushing offenses in the NFL, and we got to improve that to help out Carson Wentz some, to neutralize this pass rush a little bit, at least make them think that we may run the ball well so that we can slow them down by at least one step to give Carson Wentz a little bit more time to get the ball to those receivers that we discussed earlier. Also, start with easier throws. Get Carson Wentz some confidence and tire out the defense, and then we can start attacking the ball deep down the field. It looks like right now, instead of run the ball and then use play action to attack deep, we're attacking deep and then we'll try to get everything underneath afterwards with the threat of throwing the deep ball, which has not worked out. Carson Wentz has not been able to just come out firing and throw an accurate 70-yard deep bombs yet. So can we just do what most coordinators do with their quarterbacks, get them some short and easy stuff early and then work your way up to the more difficult stuff? I see what Scott Turner's trying to do, but it hasn't worked in 3 weeks. May want to switch it up. And speaking of that crazy pass rush attack, the Dallas Cowboys right now lead the NFL in sacks with 13. So that pass rush attack by the Eagles that got 9 last week still isn't leading the league in sacks. We're going against a better pass rush attack in the Dallas Cowboys. So if we gave up 9 sacks against the Eagles, it's not looking too good against the Cowboys, honestly. And Charles Leno, arguably our most consistent offensive lineman, is also banged up with Tyler Larson still on the PUP list, but he'll probably return for the Bears game Thursday night when in doubt. Then you have Wes Schweitzer banged up, dealing with a concussion injury. Will he even be healthy to go? And then of course Chase Roulier is on temporary IR. Hopefully it's not long-term IR. So right now it looks like Nick Martin, Zach Martin's brother, will probably be our starting center. And then if Charles Leno is unable to play, and even if he does play, he's going to be banged up. But if he can't, I guess that means Cornelius Lucas will have to start at left tackle in place of him if he can't, but that's crazy because Charles Leno has been an Iron Man. I don't think he's missed a single game in his NFL career so far, so that would be very shocking if he doesn't play. But again, even if he does, to try to block DeMarcus Lawrence and Michael Parsons while banged up is a little crazy. Also, one more thing to note before we move on with Dan Quinn. The Cowboys right now lead the league in rate at which defenses have rotated their MOF look post-snap. So basically, to break it down, you know how defenses have one look before the snap, and then after the ball is snapped, maybe like a guy that looks like they were blitzing may actually just go out in coverage, or the top safety will come down and be the lower strong safety, and the other guy ends up playing the deeper free safety type of role. You know, any change that happens after the ball is snapped to try to disguise what the defense is doing, the Cowboys are literally leading the league in that. And it's actually crazy because we're 5th in that. So Jack Del Rio apparently has been one of the 5, at least 10 most creative defensive coordinators so far this year. But Dan Quinn again is number 1. So man, Carson Wentz and Scott Turner, y'all better figure something out, because what you see pre-snap is not what you're gonna see post-snap. And y'all need to be able to communicate and make changes on the fly and do what you got to do. I mean, use some pre-snap motion, move Curtis Samuel from one side to the other to see if the Cowboys are in man coverage or zone coverage. Do things like that to kind of help you out. But we'll see, man. Just a big heads up. I'm pretty sure the Commanders are aware of it, but it's definitely something I want to bring to the attention of Commanders fans because, hey, man, don't be surprised if our offense, even if we do have some explosive plays, there may be some mistakes and some passes that are picked off or should have been picked off because maybe Carson Wentz read something completely different before the ball was snapped. Then after the ball was snapped, the coverage is completely different from what he expected, and now he's throwing the ball into double coverage or something, or right to a corner's chest or things like that. So be prepared for that. Then 3 X factors. Number 1, Wentz has to show us that he can bounce back from a bad game. No long stretches of poor play, because at least the Detroit Lions game, he had a bad first half, and then he came and kind of balled out in the second half once the offensive line gave him a little bit of time to work with. But the Eagles game, he was straight up bad the whole time, and I just came out with a film session breaking down every sack that happened against the Eagles and explaining why, like, all of them weren't Carson Wentz's fault, but quite a bit of them were. And so it was overall just a bad day for him, period. He had some good moments, but overall it was a bad day, and I need to see him bounce back. We do not want to go down long skids of poor QB play, and we're already on a 2-game losing streak. You don't want to go on a 3rd one. Second X factor, can our coaches finally produce a product on the field that is reflective of hard work, studying, and preparation for an NFL game? Why are we getting out-coached in such dramatic fashion? I mean, it's not even like you can say, you know, the Commanders are doing their best and they're coaching well, they're just getting out-coached by a superior coaching staff. No, it's like a completely huge difference. Ron Rivera, Scott Turner, and Jack Del Rio have been getting completely out-coached. I mean, at least last game, Jack Del Rio looked like he knew what he was doing a little bit, and Scott Turner looked like he knew what he was doing the second half of the Detroit game and the first and fourth quarters against the Jaguars, but not the second and third, and then the whole game against the Eagles, he looked lost. I mean, we're just getting completely out-coached. That's it. That's the big gap. I don't think it's like a huge gap in talent. Against the Eagles, maybe our defense was outmatched by their offense, so you can say we were actually outmatched against superior talent in that aspect, but our offense versus the Eagles defense, our offense and defense versus the Detroit Lions offense and defense, and the same thing with the Jaguars, we are not outmatched talent-wise, in my opinion. We're just getting severely outcoached. Even if we are outmatched, it's not as big of a gap as the score indicates or how the game, the product on the field indicates. It's definitely more so coaching than anything else that we're having problems with right now. Outside of the offensive line, it's a mix of coaching and the offensive line right now that are literally doing us the worst. So coaches, get it together, man. Can we actually go out there and look like we prepared? I mean, there were some things I said in my Detroit Lions preview game that we should do. Scott Turner didn't do it until the second half. We would look bad in the first half and look good in the second half. I wonder why. And then number 3, and the final X factor, in comparison to our last opponent, like I said, every preview game, the 3rd X factor will always be me comparing our current opponent to our previous one. And is this a better matchup for us? Well, honestly, to me, the Eagles are better than the Cowboys in literally every way except for pass rush. Outside of that, I think the Cowboys are technically a less difficult team. I don't want to say easier because nobody's easy, especially when you're playing as poorly as we are as a franchise, as in the Commanders. But the Cowboys are not as good as the Eagles. The only thing that the Cowboys have over the Eagles is pass rush. But honestly, the Eagles' pass rush was just a bigger mismatch for us because DeMarcus Lawrence is basically like a Chase Young, Montez Sweat type of long, athletic defender build that Samuel Cosmi and Charles Leno are used to blocking against and practice against every day in practice, training camp, all of that type of stuff. And then Micah Parsons is really athletic and explosive, but Samuel Cosmi is also athletic and can find a way to neutralize them, even if it's without technique, with just pure athleticism. And Charles Leno is really good at finding a way to match up well against what he's currently going against. I mean, a guy like a DeMarcus Lawrence, he's going to play stronger. A guy with Micah Parsons, he's going to probably go out with a wider kick step to prepare himself for a speedier guy. But like the Eagles, man, they just had straight brutes that were stronger than us, and Samuel Cosmi and Charles Leno couldn't do nothing against it. Now, granted, Samuel Cosmi started to show a little bit of improvement as the game went on, but you could clearly tell that Samuel Cosmi was not used to blocking something like that. So, again, I still feel like the Cowboys' pass rush is a better pass rush overall than the Eagles, but the Eagles definitely have a better matchup against our offensive line than maybe even the Cowboys do, even though, again, the Cowboys do have a better pass rush overall than than the Eagles. So we'll see, man. But yeah, I think the Cowboys are straight up just an easier matchup for us. Well, less difficult. And then my final score prediction, I have us losing, honestly, 24-28. Mostly just because I'm afraid that Scott Turner's going to take too long to get this offense going, and we're gonna end up scoring more of our points in the second half than the first half. And I also feel like even though we clearly need to find a way to stop Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, I just can see them having pretty good days. I mean, it just seems like every time we go against an opponent, there's always some stat like this is their best game since such and such, you know, since like years ago, like such and such has the most rushing yards or their most reception yards or the best DVOA since 2 years ago against us. Always some stuff like that. Somebody's always having their best day of the season. Somebody's always breaking some type of record or something, and it just seems like we always allow something. And I'm just afraid that Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, this may be like the one good game Zeke has this season or something like that. Or even though, like I said, we know we're supposed to stop Tony Pollard, maybe Cole Holcomb and David Mayo are out there struggling to stop him out in space on screens. He's out there making people miss like DeAndre Swift did against us. And just like we knew going into the Detroit Lions game, we had to stop Amon-Ra St. Brown. Somehow, he was out there getting everything he wanted out of the backfield. We lost track of him. We lost track of him deep down the field, like he's not obviously their best receiver by far. And it's just like, what faith do I have in Jack Del Rio to be able to stop a CeeDee Lamb who's clearly their best receiver? So I think we honestly do have a good chance to win this game. And like I said, matchup wise, I feel like this is a better matchup for us by far than the Eagles. I feel like we can definitely end our 2-game streak, but to be completely realistic, as of right now, how I'm looking at it and with the injuries that we're dealing with Charles Leno and things like that, maybe if we would have played week 7 and everybody's fully healthy, I would predict us to win. But I think injuries may be a big enough difference, and I see us losing 24-28. I see Cooper Rush, because of the run game, being able to do what he wants to do in the passing game, because now they have a balanced offensive attack and we're worried about both and we're allowing both to happen or something like that. And I see our offense getting something going, but it may be too little too late. I mean, Washington has the 4th most points per game in the NFC right now, 12th in the NFL, but what does it matter when the 3 teams that we've played so far are all in the top 10? Because our defense just allowed them to get whatever they want. Now, again, I saw a little bit of spark and a little bit of good from the defense against the Eagles, but at the end of the day, the Eagles still scored 24 points. And also, to note, I'm including the field goal in that because Joey Sly is still technically yet to attempt a field goal this year, which is like unheard of. Like, is this a first time that a kicker for an NFL team has ever gone 3 full weeks into the season without a field goal attempt? He had one, but then there was like a penalty or something. I think he got ran. Something happened, and then it ended up like not counting. So technically, Joey Sly hasn't attempted a single field goal yet. But I mean, at some point a field goal is going to have to get made. We're just not going to go this entire season without a field goal. So I'm going to give us a field goal here, and I think this game is close. Again, I would not be surprised at all if we win this game, but in my professional opinion and how we've coached so far, especially against the Detroit Lions and the Eagles, I feel like the Cowboys can end up sneaking away a win here. But again, for various reasons, I could also see us winning 35-14 if everything that we're supposed to do, we do correctly. Because again, teams just aren't that much better than us on paper. We just been getting severely outcoached. So Jack Del Rio and Scott Turner and Ron Rivera, especially with those challenge flags and the time management with the timeouts, if they all come out there and do what they're supposed to do, I can see us winning by 2+ touchdowns. But again, I'm going with Washington 24, Dallas 28 right now. Especially since it's in Dallas. Maybe if it were in FedEx Field, I would pick us, but it's in Dallas. We're going to be wearing all black, so this should be fun. Let's go out there and show what we can do with our first time wearing the all black jerseys. I would love for us to win, but we'll see. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Let me know your score predictions. Do you have Washington winning and finally ending this 2-game win streak and going 500, 2-2? Moving on to the Chicago Bears Thursday night for week 5. Also, please leave a like on this video if you liked it. If you learned anything, also go make sure you check out that film session I came out with earlier, or probably by the time you're watching this last night. And also, shouts out to all of my supporters, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.